Good evening, fellow history enthusiasts. Welcome to another journey through time on Insomnia History. Tonight, we delve into one of history's most enigmatic organizations, the Knights Templar, whose secrets continue to captivate our imagination nearly a millennium later. Imagine waking up on Friday, October 13th, 1307. The sun rises over medieval France, and thousands of men, knights, servants, and priests alike, begin their day unaware that by nightfall, their world would collapse completely. In a single coordinated strike that spanned an entire kingdom, hundreds of Knights Templar were arrested without warning. Their vast wealth was seized, their leaders imprisoned, and their nearly 200-year legacy was about to be systematically destroyed. What could have prompted such a dramatic fall from grace for an order that had once been the medieval world's most powerful military and financial institution? This question has puzzled historians for centuries. The Knights Templar exist today in popular imagination through novels, films, and video games, often portrayed as guardians of ancient secrets or bearers of hidden knowledge. But the truth behind this legendary order is far more fascinating than fiction could ever suggest. Their actual story involves political intrigue, vast wealth, religious fervor, and ultimately a betrayal that would echo through history. The origins of the Knights Templar were surprisingly humble. In the aftermath of the First Crusade in 1099, Jerusalem had fallen to Christian forces. European pilgrims began traveling to the Holy Land in unprecedented numbers, eager to visit sites sacred to their faith. However, the roads leading to Jerusalem were extremely dangerous. Pilgrims frequently faced attacks from bandits and hostile local forces who preyed on these unarmed travelers. It was against this backdrop that a French knight named Hugues de Payens approached King Baldwin II of Jerusalem in 1119 with a novel proposal. He and 8 fellow knights would form a brotherhood dedicated to protecting pilgrims on the dangerous roads leading to the Holy City. Baldwin agreed, and the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, later known simply as the Knights Templar, was born. Their headquarters were established on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, in a wing of the royal palace believed to be built over the ruins of the ancient Temple of Solomon. This location would give the order its name and connect them forever with the mystical legacy of biblical history. The original 9 knights took monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, creating something entirely new in medieval society. Warrior monks who combined religious devotion with military prowess. For their first 9 years, the Templars remained a small organization with limited resources. Historical records suggest they were so poor that 2 knights would share a single horse, an image later immortalized in their famous seal. Despite their noble mission, they attracted few new members and little financial support. This would soon change dramatically. In 1129, the Council of Troyes provided the critical turning point for the fledgling order. The influential Cistercian abbot Bernard of Clairvaux championed their cause and helped create their official rule, the code by which they would live. Drawing heavily from the Cistercian monastic tradition, this rule established the Templars as an official religious order recognized by the Catholic Church. With Bernard's powerful endorsement, the Templars gained something invaluable: legitimacy. Bernard went further by writing in praise of the new knighthood, a treatise that portrayed the Templars as the ideal Christian warriors. He contrasted them with secular knights, whom he criticized for fighting for glory, wealth, and vanity. The Templars, by contrast, fought only for Christ. This powerful propaganda transformed public perception of the order and opened floodgates of support from across Europe. The evolution of the Templars from 9 poor knights to a powerful international organization happened with remarkable speed. Pope Innocent X issued the papal bull Omnidatum Optimum in 139, granting the order extraordinary privileges. They would answer only to the Pope, not to local bishops or secular rulers. They were exempted from taxes and could cross any border freely. Perhaps most significantly, they could build their own churches with their own priests, collect tithes, and bury their dead in their own cemeteries. These privileges allowed the Templars to operate as a virtually autonomous entity within medieval society, a state within states that transcended the normal boundaries of feudal power. As donations poured in from noble families across Europe, the Templars grew from a small band of knights to an organization with thousands of members operating across multiple continents. The distinctive appearance of Templar knights became legendary on the battlefields of the Crusades, clad in white mantles emblazoned with a red cross. They took vows never to retreat unless outnumbered 3-1. Their battle standard, known as the Busant, featured black and white sections representing the dual nature of their lives. Black for the sins of their secular past, white for the purity of their current religious life. Their military tactics were revolutionary for the era. While most medieval battles involved loosely organized charges, the Templars fought with discipline and coordination rarely seen in Western armies of the period. They developed a hierarchical command structure and used sophisticated communication systems on the battlefield. When the Templars charged, they moved as a unified force behind their marshal, with strict rules governing their formations and movements. The Templar rule dictated every aspect of their daily lives in remarkable detail. Knights slept fully clothed with their weapons, ready to fight at a moment's notice. They ate in silence while listening to scripture readings. Their hair was kept short, though they were required to never fully shave their beards, which grow on the chin and face. Every element of their existence was regulated, from the quality of their clothing to the hours of prayer they observed daily. This strict lifestyle created warriors of unprecedented discipline and commitment. Muslim chronicles from the period express both fear and respect for these Christian warriors, who seemed to embrace death so readily. The 12th century Muslim chronicler Usama ibn Munshidash wrote of them, "Among the Franks are those who have become acclimatized and have associated long with the Muslims. These are much better than those who have recently arrived from their homelands, but they are the exception and cannot be taken as typical." What truly distinguished the Templars from other military orders was their evolution into Europe's first banking network. As pilgrims prepared for journeys to the Holy Land, they faced a practical problem. Traveling with substantial amounts of gold made them targets for thieves. The Templars offered an innovative solution. A pilgrim could deposit funds at a Templar preceptory in Europe and receive a letter of credit, a document that could be redeemed at a Templar establishment in the Holy Land. This primitive banking system soon expanded far beyond its original purpose. European nobles, merchants, and even monarchs began using the Templars to store wealth, transfer funds across long distances, and secure loans. The Templars' international network, strict accountability, and reputation for honesty made them ideal financial intermediaries in an age before modern banking existed. By the late 12th century, the Templars had become indispensable to European economies. Their Paris temple functioned as the treasury for the French crown. In London, their headquarters at the Temple District, which still bears this name today, served similar functions for English monarchs. Financial records show they managed agricultural estates, operated shipping fleets, and conducted trade throughout the Mediterranean and beyond. This economic power was matched by continued military significance. During the 12th and early 13th centuries, the Templars constructed massive stone castles throughout the Holy Land. These fortifications represented the cutting edge of military architecture: concentric walls, rounded towers resistant to undermining, narrow windows for archers. and elaborate systems of murder holes and machicolations for dropping objects on attackers. Some Templar castles, like Chateau Pèlerin on the coast of modern Israel, were considered virtually impregnable. Not all their military ventures were successful, however, as Muslim forces under leaders like Saladin and Baybars gradually reconquered the Crusader states. The Templars suffered significant defeats. The Battle of Hattin in 1187 was particularly devastating. The Templars who survived the battle were executed by Saladin's forces, who viewed them as the most dangerous of all Christian warriors. After Saladin's reconquest of Jerusalem, the Templars established new headquarters in Acre, continuing their military campaigns. But with each passing decade, Christian holdings in the Holy Land grew smaller. By the late 13th century, the Crusader presence had been reduced to a few coastal cities. The final blow came in 1291, when Acre fell to Mamluk forces after a brutal siege. The surviving Templars retreated to Cyprus, where they regrouped and considered their future. The loss of the Holy Land created an existential crisis for the Templars. Their primary mission, protecting pilgrims and fighting for Christian control of Jerusalem, was no longer viable. While they remained wealthy and powerful, questions began to arise about their purpose. Some proposed merging with other military orders like the Hospitallers. Others suggested new crusades to reclaim Jerusalem. As they debated these options, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. In the courts of Europe, particularly in France, attitudes toward the Templars were changing. King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, had accumulated enormous debts, including significant sums owed to the Templars themselves. The order's financial power, military capability, and direct allegiance to the Pope made them a potential threat to Philip's authority within his own kingdom. Their wealth made them an attractive target for a king perpetually short of funds. The stage was being set for one of history's most dramatic downfalls. The Templars, who had risen from humble beginnings to become a pillar of medieval society, were about to face accusations so shocking that they would reverberate through centuries. Their vast network of castles, farms, churches, and financial institutions seemed unassailable. Yet, in a matter of days, this mighty order would begin to crumble. What followed would be a carefully orchestrated campaign of arrests, torture, and propaganda that would transform these once revered warriors into alleged heretics and practitioners of dark rituals. The charges would include spitting on the cross, denying Christ, idol worship, and engaging in forbidden sexual practices. But were any of these accusations true? Or were they carefully crafted lies designed to justify the seizure of Templar wealth? The order that had stood as the elite fighting force of Christendom for nearly 2 centuries was about to face its greatest battle, not on the plains of the Holy Land against Muslim armies, but in the dungeons and courts of Christian Europe. And unlike the battlefield, where the rules of engagement were clear, this would be a struggle against shadowy accusations and political machinations, for which the Templars were wholly unprepared. The story of the Knights Templar presents historians with one of the most perplexing puzzles of the medieval period. How could an organization that stood as a pillar of Christian Europe for nearly 2 centuries collapse so suddenly and completely? The traditional narrative that they were destroyed because they had become corrupt heretics seems suspiciously convenient for those who benefited from their downfall. Yet alternative explanations present their own complications. Unraveling the truth requires navigating a labyrinth of contradictory evidence, political motivations, and historical distortions. Contemporary accounts of the Templars' trials were written primarily by their accusers or those sympathetic to King Philip's cause. Meanwhile, many Templar records were destroyed during the suppression of the order or have been lost over the centuries. This creates a fundamental imbalance in our historical understanding, as we often hear the prosecution's case, but rarely the defense. The challenge deepens when we consider the era's complex religious landscape. Early 14th century, Europe was rife with fears of heresy and witchcraft. The Catholic Church had been combating various heterodox movements, from the Cathars in southern France to the Waldensians in Italy. These campaigns created cultural frameworks and legal precedents that could be weaponized against any group that fell from political favor. Historians face a formidable task in separating genuine religious concerns from political and economic motivations. King Philip IV's financial troubles were well documented. He had previously expelled Jewish communities from France in 1306, confiscating their property to replenish his treasury. He had also debased French currency and clashed with Pope Boniface VIII in a struggle that nearly led to the king's excommunication. These patterns suggest financial opportunism rather than religious zeal. The Templar question becomes further complicated by the existence of genuine reform concerns within the Church. By the early 14th century, many religious thinkers had been calling for the merger of military orders to improve efficiency in the continuing struggle against Islamic powers. Pope Clement V himself had invited the Grand Masters of both the Templars and Hospitallers to discuss such reforms before Philip's actions forced a crisis. Were there legitimate organizational issues that needed addressing, independent of the sensational accusations? Another challenge lies in interpreting the confessions extracted from Templar Knights. Court records document admissions to spitting on the cross, denying Christ, and engaging in indecent kissing rituals and homosexual practices. Yet these confessions were obtained under extreme torture, methods so brutal that several knights died during interrogation. Legal historians note that torture-induced testimony from this period typically conformed to whatever narrative the interrogators suggested, rendering such evidence deeply problematic. Particularly puzzling is the inconsistency in the confessions. Templars in France, under direct pressure from Philip's agents, largely confessed to heretical activities. Yet when knights were questioned in England, Germany, Spain, and Portugal, beyond Philip's immediate influence, they generally maintained their innocence. This geographical disparity in testimony presents a critical challenge for historical interpretation. The role of Pope Clement V adds another layer of complexity. As the spiritual leader of Christendom and the Templars' direct superior, his actions should have been decisive in determining the truth. Yet Clement's position was compromised by his political dependence on Philip IV. I, a French pope based in Avignon rather than Rome, Clement had been elected with Philip's support and remained vulnerable to his pressure. How much can we trust papal declarations against the Templars when they were issued under such circumstances? Analyzing the Templars' supposed heretical practices requires contextual understanding of medieval religious symbolism and initiation rites. Some scholars suggest that if any unorthodox practices existed, they might have been misinterpreted military hazing rituals or tests of obedience. Others propose connections to Eastern practices encountered during the Templars' time in the Holy Land. Without clear evidence of the actual ceremonies performed, historians must speculate based on fragmentary and biased accounts. The problem extends to understanding Templar wealth and its disappearance. The order's treasury in Paris was found nearly empty when royal officials seized it, despite extensive financial activities in the preceding years. The fate of their substantial fleet of ships remains similarly mysterious, with no record of their capture or destruction. Did the Templars receive warning of the impending arrests? Did their financial network allow them to transfer assets? Or was their wealth exaggerated in contemporary accounts? Archaeological evidence presents its own interpretive challenges. Templar sites throughout Europe contain ambiguous symbols and architectural features that some researchers linked to esoteric knowledge or alternative religious traditions. Yet distinguishing between standard medieval Masonic practices and genuinely unorthodox elements requires specialized expertise. The line between objective analysis and speculative interpretation often blurs in discussions of Templar architecture and artifacts. Perhaps the most fundamental problem in understanding the Templars' downfall is determining whether they had actually diverged from Orthodox Christianity. Some historians suggest that decades in the Holy Land exposed them to Islamic and Eastern Christian ideas that influenced their practices. Others propose that as a wealthy, insular organization, answerable only to the Pope, they may have developed their own spiritual interpretations and rituals. Without internal Templar documents explaining their beliefs, such theories remain speculative. The dramatic legacy of the Templars creates additional obstacles to historical clarity. Since their suppression, they have been adopted by numerous groups with their own agendas. Freemasons, beginning in the 18th century, claimed Templar heritage. Occultists and esoteric societies have incorporated Templar symbols and mythology into their own systems. Nationalist movements have appropriated them as historical heroes. Each new interpretation has added layers of speculation that obscure the historical record. The problem of determining what happened to surviving Templars after the order's suppression generates further questions. While senior leaders faced execution, thousands of ordinary knights and sergeants disappeared from historical records. Some evidence suggests they were absorbed into other military orders, particularly the Hospitallers, who received much of the Templar property. Others may have fled to regions beyond papal authority, or simply returned to secular life. This diaspora complicates efforts to trace Templar influence beyond 1312. Modern scholarship faces methodological challenges when approaching the Templar question. The interdisciplinary nature of Templar studies requires expertise in medieval religion, military history, economics, architecture, and multiple languages, including Latin, Old French, and Arabic. Few researchers possess this comprehensive knowledge, leading to fragmented analysis. Collaborations between specialists with different areas of expertise often reveal connections missed by narrower approaches. Documentary evidence presents its own problems. Many key sources exist only in later copies or translations, raising questions about authenticity and modification. The interrogation records from Templar trials vary significantly in their completeness and reliability. Royal correspondence regarding the Templars has survived selectively, often preserved specifically because it supported the official narrative of Templar guilt. The chronology of events surrounding the Templars' arrest raises particular suspicions. King Philip's actions against them came with remarkable speed and coordination. On October 13, 1307, royal officials throughout France simultaneously arrested Templars in a logistical operation that would have required extensive planning. This suggests a predetermined decision to destroy the order rather than a genuine investigation of emerging concerns. The timing coincided with Philip's urgent financial needs, further suggesting premeditation. Legal scholars note significant procedural irregularities in the Templar trials. The order itself was never allowed to mount a formal corporate defense, despite such rights being standard in canon law proceedings. When individual Templars who had initially confessed later recanted, claiming their confessions were extracted through torture, they were declared relapsed heretics and burned at the stake. This effectively silenced counter-narratives that might have exonerated the order. The final declaration dissolving the Templars occurred under unusual circumstances. Pope Clement VI's Bull Vox in Excelso did not actually declare the order guilty of the charges, but instead stated it was being disbanded because its reputation had been too severely damaged to continue functioning effectively. This careful wording has led some historians to suggest that Clement remained unconvinced of their guilt but lacked the political strength to resist Philip's demands for their destruction. Regional variations in the Templars' fate further complicate historical understanding. In Portugal, the order was simply renamed as the Order of Christ and continued much as before. In Aragon, knights were initially arrested, but later declared innocent. In England, torture was applied only after direct papal demand, and confessions remained rare. These different outcomes suggest that local political conditions, rather than consistent evidence of wrongdoing, determined how Templars were treated. Cultural differences between Templar branches may also explain some inconsistencies in the evidence. The order operated across diverse regions, from Scotland to Cyprus, potentially developing regional variations in practices. Masters of different preceptories had considerable autonomy in daily operations. Without a standardized inspection system comparable to modern organizations, practices could have diverged significantly between regions, making it difficult to characterize the order as a whole. Theological debates about orthodoxy and heresy during this period were increasingly sophisticated and nuanced. The very definition of heretical behavior was evolving through the early 14th century as the Church formalized its inquisitorial procedures. This creates interpretive problems for modern historians trying to determine whether specific Templar practices would have been considered problematic by contemporary standards separate from the politically motivated accusations. The broader context of early 14th century power struggles between monarchies and the papacy adds another dimension to the problem. Philip's conflict with the Templars came during a period when secular rulers throughout Europe were asserting greater authority over religious institutions within their territories. The Templars, with their international structure and papal protection, represented a challenge to this emerging model of state authority that transcended the specific accusations made against them. Economic historians face particular challenges in assessing Templar financial activities. Their banking practices existed before formal economic theory or standardized accounting. While records of significant transactions with European monarchs exist, the full scope of their economic operations remains unclear. Did their financial innovations constitute an early form of capitalism developing within feudal structures? Were their economic activities compatible with their religious vows? These questions invite continuing debate. The fate of Templar knowledge represents another historical puzzle. As an organization operating across cultural boundaries for nearly 2 centuries, they had accumulated practical expertise in areas ranging from architecture to medicine, agriculture to navigation. How much of this knowledge was preserved and transmitted after their suppression? Did their architectural techniques influence Gothic cathedral builders? Were their navigational charts passed to other seafaring orders? The fragmentary evidence permits multiple interpretations. For modern researchers, separating the documented history of the Templars from their legendary afterlife presents ongoing difficulties. Contemporary popular culture continually generates new Templar narratives through novels, films, and games that remix historical elements with pure fiction. These modern interpretations then influence public understanding and even academic approaches to the historical questions. The mysterious circumstances of the Templars' suppression create fertile ground for continuing speculation that can overshadow rigorous historical analysis. The ultimate challenge in understanding the Templars' downfall may be determining whether we can ever know the complete truth about an organization that operated under vows of secrecy, whose records were deliberately destroyed, and whose story has been continuously reinterpreted according to the changing needs and interests of succeeding generations. Perhaps this fundamental uncertainty explains our enduring fascination with their story. In the space between historical fact and legend, the Templars continue to serve as a canvas for our exploration of power, faith, and betrayal. To understand the downfall of the Knights Templar, we must first examine the complex web of political, religious, and economic forces that shaped their final days. The late 13th and early 14th centuries marked a period of profound transformation across Europe. The age of the Crusades was ending. The old feudal order was gradually giving way to more centralized monarchies. Banking and commerce were evolving beyond traditional structures. Within this changing landscape, the Templars increasingly appeared as an anachronism, powerful yet potentially obsolete. King Philip IV of France emerges as the primary antagonist in the Templar tragedy. Born in 1268, Philip inherited the French throne at age 17. His reign was characterized by efforts to strengthen royal authority and expand French territory. Tall and handsome, contemporaries called him Philip the Fair, yet his governance revealed a calculating, ruthless personality. Chronically short of funds due to wars with England and Flanders, Philip repeatedly employed extreme measures to secure financing, including persecuting Jews, arresting Italian bankers, and debasing French currency. Philip surrounded himself with formidable legal minds, men like Guillaume de Nogaret, his keeper of the seals, and Guillaume de Plaisance, a royal counselor. These officials developed revolutionary legal concepts that expanded royal power at the expense of traditional authorities. They advanced the notion that the king represented the embodiment of the French state, with a duty to protect it from all threats, internal or external. This early version of raison d'etat provided justification for extraordinary measures against anyone perceived as opposing royal interests. Philip's relationship with the Catholic Church was particularly contentious. His conflict with Pope Boniface VIII escalated to unprecedented levels when the king attempted to tax French clergy without papal approval. When Boniface issued the bull Unam Sanctum in 1302, asserting papal supremacy over all Christian rulers, Philip's response was dramatic. He sent Guillaume de Nogaret to Italy, where the royal agent allegedly slapped the 68-year-old pontiff and briefly imprisoned him. Though Boniface was soon freed, he died within weeks of the ordeal. This episode demonstrated Philip's willingness to challenge even the highest spiritual authority when it interfered with his objectives. It also revealed his sophisticated use of propaganda. Royal publicists portrayed Boniface as corrupt, heretical, and even engaged in demonic practices. These techniques of character assassination would later be deployed against the Templars with devastating effect. After Boniface's death and the brief pontificate of Benedict XII, Philip secured the election of a French archbishop as Pope Clement IV in 1305. The new pope, born Bertrand de Goux, had previously served as Archbishop of Bordeaux. Rather than moving to Rome, Clement established his court at Avignon, beginning the period historians call the Avignon Papacy. Though not technically on French soil, Avignon's proximity to Philip's kingdom left Clement vulnerable to royal influence. Pope Clement's relationship with Philip was complex. Though often portrayed as merely the king's puppet, Clement attempted to maintain some independence while avoiding direct confrontation. He balanced precariously between his theoretical authority as Christ's vicar and the practical reality of French power. This complicated dynamic would prove crucial in the Templar affair, as Clement's vacillation between resistance and acquiescence ultimately failed to protect the order. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, presents a tragic figure in this historical drama. Selected to lead the order in 1292, de Molay spent his early years as Grand Master attempting to organize a new crusade to reclaim the Holy Land. He traveled extensively throughout Europe, seeking support from kings and nobles. By 1306, he had been summoned to France, ostensibly to discuss plans for a joint Templar Hospitaller military expedition to the east. De Molay appears to have been a traditionally minded military leader rather than a skilled politician. Contemporary accounts describe him as honorable, pious, and dedicated to his order's original purpose. However, he seemed ill-prepared for the sophisticated legal and propaganda tactics deployed by Philip's ministers. His straightforward military leadership style proved inadequate against the machinations of the French royal court. The broader geopolitical situation in Europe and the Mediterranean contributed significantly to the Templars' vulnerability. With the fall of Acre in 1291, Christian powers had lost their last major foothold in the Holy Land. The Templars had relocated their headquarters to Cyprus, but their primary mission of protecting pilgrims and securing Christian control of Jerusalem had become unachievable in the short term. This created a crisis of purpose that undermined their traditional justification for maintaining a large military organization. Simultaneously, European monarchies were evolving toward more bureaucratic, centralized structures. Professional royal administrators increasingly replaced feudal networks. Standing armies began supplementing or replacing traditional knight service. Royal taxation systems grew more sophisticated. Within this modernizing framework, the Templars, with their special privileges, independent international structure, and direct papal allegiance, increasingly appeared as anomalous competitors to royal authority rather than assets. The financial dimensions of the Templar controversy cannot be overstated. By the early 14th century, the order had developed sophisticated banking operations throughout Europe. They served as treasurers for kings and nobles, managed agricultural estates, facilitated international trade, and provided loans to various parties, including the French crown. Philip himself had sought refuge in the Paris Temple during civil disturbances in 1306, witnessing firsthand the contrast between Templar wealth and his own financial difficulties. Royal financial records indicate that Philip owed substantial sums to the Templars. The exact amount remains disputed among historians, but contemporary accounts suggest it was significant enough to strain the crown's resources. This debt created an obvious motivation for Philip to seek control of Templar assets. Moreover, the order's wealth represented an attractive solution to the king's perpetual need for funds to finance his territorial ambitions and administrative expansion. Several theories attempt to explain the specific triggers for Philip's action against the Templars in 1307. Some historians point to a series of rebukes the king had received from Jacques de Molay regarding proposed changes to crusading operations. Others suggest that failed negotiations to merge the Templars with the Hospitallers threatened Philip's plans to control such a combined organization through his relatives. Still others propose that rumors of unusual Templar initiation rituals had reached the king, providing a convenient pretext for action. A particularly intriguing theory connects the Templar suppression to broader changes in banking and finance. Italian banking houses like the Peruzzi and Bardi were developing new financial instruments and practices that made the Templars' methods increasingly obsolete. By eliminating the Templars, Philip could potentially transition French financial operations to these more sophisticated Italian systems, while simultaneously erasing his debts to the order. The specific allegations against the Templars reflected common themes in medieval heresy accusations, but contained unique elements that seemed carefully crafted to ensure maximum public outrage. Templars were accused of spitting or trampling on the cross during initiation ceremonies, denying Christ, worshipping a mysterious idol called Baphomet, and engaging in institutionalized homosexual practices. These charges combined religious transgression with sexual deviance, a powerful combination in medieval thought that linked spiritual and bodily corruption. The idol allegation proves particularly interesting to historians. Some suggest it may have originated from misunderstandings of Islamic religious practices observed during the Templars' time in the Middle East. Others propose connections to Eastern Christian relics like the Shroud of Mandelion, A third theory suggests the word Baphomet itself may be a corruption of Muhammad, reflecting European fears of Islamic influence. Without conclusive evidence, the idol remains one of many Templar mysteries. A forensic examination of the arrest operation reveals careful planning by Philip's government. Secret orders were sent to royal officials throughout France to be opened simultaneously on October 13, 1307. The coordinated arrests caught most Templars completely unprepared, suggesting they had no warning of the coming persecution. This contradicts some popular theories that Templars anticipated their downfall and managed to hide significant treasures or knowledge before the arrests. The interrogation methods employed against arrested Templars represented the most extreme techniques of medieval judicial torture. Court records document the application of strappadodo, suspension by the arms tied behind the back, heated metal plates to the feet, and various devices that crushed bones or tore flesh. Many knights died during these sessions. Others suffered permanent physical damage. Under such extreme duress, many Templars confessed to whatever charges their torturers suggested. The initial phase of arrests targeted only Templars in France, those directly under Philip's authority. Pope Clement V initially responded with outrage, seeing the king's unilateral action against a papal order as an infringement on church jurisdiction. He issued the bull Pastoralis Preeminentiae, suspending the inquisitors appointed by Philip and asserting papal control over the process. However, facing threats from Philip, Clement eventually compromised by ordering all Christian monarchs to arrest Templars in their territories. The response to this papal directive varied dramatically by region, providing crucial comparative evidence for historians. In England, Edward II initially resisted, then conducted arrests half-heartedly. English interrogation records show much milder questioning and few confessions. In Aragon, James II arrested Templars, but faced armed resistance from knights who fortified themselves in castles like Miravet and Monzon. German ecclesiastical authorities largely found Templars innocent of heresy. These regional variations suggest the charges had more to do with French royal policy than with actual Templar practices. The Council of Vienne in 1311-1312 represented the formal ecclesiastical judgment on the Templar order. Pope Clement convened this General Church Council to address several matters, including the Templar question. Historical records indicate that most prelates at the council opposed abolishing the order based on the evidence presented. When several Templars arrived, requesting to defend their organization, they were arrested rather than permitted to speak. Despite this opposition, Clement issued the Bull Vox in Excelso on March 22, 1312, officially dissolving the Templar order. Notably, the document did not definitively declare the Templars guilty of heresy, but instead suppressed them by way of provision rather than condemnation. This careful wording suggests Clement himself remained unconvinced of the order's guilt, but lacked the political strength to resist Philip's demands. A subsequent bull, ad providum, transferred most Templar properties to the Knights Hospitaller, although Philip managed to extract substantial administrative fees before releasing the French properties. The final act of the Templar drama came on March 18, 1314, when Jacques de Molay and Geoffrey de Charny, preceptor of Normandy, were burned at the stake in Paris. Both men had previously confessed under torture, but dramatically recanted their confessions at a public ceremony, declaring the order innocent of all charges. Philip immediately ordered their execution as relapsed heretics, without consulting ecclesiastical authorities. According to legend, de Molay used his final moments to summon both Philip and Clement to meet him before God's judgment within the year. When both men died within months, Clement in April and Philip in November 1314, the coincidence further enhanced the Templars' mythical status. Alternative theories about the Templars' fate proliferated almost immediately after their suppression. Portuguese Templars simply reorganized as the Order of Christ with papal blessing. Scottish legends claim that Templars fled to Scotland, where they supposedly fought at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, and later influenced the development of Freemasonry. Swiss traditions connect the Templars to the founding of the Swiss Confederation. Maritime theories suggest Templar ships escaped to various destinations, ranging from the Baltic to North America. While most of these narratives lack substantial historical evidence, they demonstrate how quickly the Templar legacy began transforming into legend. Recent scholarship has focused increasingly on the political and economic aspects of the Templar suppression, rather than religious factors. The timing coincided with Philip IV's efforts to assert royal authority over all aspects of French life. Having previously challenged the papacy, suppressed Jewish communities, and attacked Italian bankers, the king's move against the Templars appears consistent with his broader program of eliminating alternative power centers and consolidating financial resources under crown control. The Templar case also reflected evolving concepts of heresy and treason in late medieval jurisprudence. Philip's legal experts deliberately blurred the distinction between these offenses, arguing that spiritual corruption constituted a threat to the kingdom itself. This intellectual framework would later support the development of absolutist theories of monarchy that reached their zenith under Louis XIV. By portraying the Templars as enemies of both church and state, Philip established a powerful precedent for royal intervention in religious affairs. The events leading to the destruction of the Knights Templar reached their climax in the autumn of 1307. By September of that year, rumors had begun circulating through Paris that King Philip was planning dramatic action against a major religious organization. While the specific target remained secret, tension built within royal circles as messengers carried sealed orders to officials throughout France. These documents contained explicit instructions. They were not to be opened until the night of October 12th, with actions to be executed at dawn on Friday, October 13th. This date would forever alter the connotation of Friday the 13th in Western culture, transforming it from an unremarkable calendar day into a symbol of catastrophic misfortune. The sealed orders revealed Philip's stunning plan: the simultaneous arrest of every Templar knight, sergeant, and priest throughout France on charges of heresy, blasphemy, and various unnatural practices. Royal bailiffs and seneschals were instructed to seize all Templar properties, documents, and treasuries immediately upon making the arrests. Jacques de Molay, Grand Master of the Order, had no inkling of the coming disaster. Just weeks earlier, on October 12th, he had served as an honorary pallbearer at the funeral of Catherine de Courtenay, wife of Philip's brother Charles d'O. This prestigious role at a royal funeral suggests de Molay believed himself to be in good standing with the French crown. More significantly, the Grand Master had been invited to Paris specifically by Pope Clement V to discuss plans for a new crusade, creating a false sense of security that would prove fatal. Dawn broke on Friday, October 13th, 1307, and royal officials moved with military precision. In Paris, Guillaume de Nogaret personally led the detachment that surrounded the Templar headquarters. Contemporary accounts describe how the knights were arrested while still in their dormitories, many seized before they could dress or arm themselves. Similar scenes played out in Templar preceptories across France. The operation's success relied on complete surprise, and in this regard, it worked perfectly. The key witness, whose testimony had provided the legal pretext for these arrests, was a man named Squin de Flexion, sometimes identified as a former Templar. Historical records about this figure remain fragmentary and contradictory. Some accounts suggest he was an expelled member seeking revenge. Others portray him as a common criminal who fabricated accusations in exchange for a pardon. Regardless of his background, his claims about secret Templar rituals formed the foundation for the initial charges. Within days of the arrests, the interrogations began. Medieval inquisitorial procedures operated under principles fundamentally different from modern judicial systems. Accused persons were not informed of specific charges before questioning. They had no right to legal representation. The inquisitor's goal was not to evaluate evidence impartially, but to extract confessions. Most critically, torture was considered a legitimate means of revealing hidden truth, based on the belief that physical pain would compel the guilty to admit their sins. The first Templars to break under torture included knights of varying ranks. Their confessions followed remarkably similar patterns, suggesting their interrogators had specific narratives they sought to confirm. According to trial records, many admitted to ceremonies in which new members were required to deny Christ, spit on a crucifix, and exchange obscene kisses with their receptors. Some described worship of a bearded head or idol. Others confessed to being told that homosexual relations between members were permissible. When news of the arrests reached Pope Clement V, his initial reaction was furious indignation. As the Templars' direct ecclesiastical superior, he viewed Philip's unilateral action as a usurpation of papal authority. On October 27th, he wrote to Philip declaring, "You have laid a violent hand on the persons and property of those who are subject to us and to the Roman Church, and in so doing, you have offended our majesty." This strong language suggested Clement might defend the order against royal aggression. However, Philip's response demonstrated his mastery of political maneuvering. He arranged for confessions from 72 Templars to be read publicly before the University of Paris faculty, securing their theological opinion that the confessed acts constituted heresy. Royal propagandists stirred public sentiment against the order through dramatic accounts of their alleged crimes. Most crucially, Philip implied that any defense of the Templars would make the Pope himself suspect of heretical sympathies. Faced with this pressure, Clement's resistance crumbled. On November 22, 1307, he issued the bull Pastoralis Preeminentiae, instructing all Christian monarchs to arrest Templars in their territories. This capitulation marked a critical turning point. While the Pope would continue attempting to maintain some control over the proceedings, he had effectively endorsed Philip's actions and internationalized what had begun as a French initiative. The responses from other European rulers varied significantly. In England, King Edward II initially expressed skepticism about the charges. He wrote to fellow monarchs suggesting the accusations stemmed from envy and cupidity rather than zeal for justice. Nevertheless, under papal pressure, Edward eventually ordered arrests on January 10, 1308. English Templars were imprisoned, but treated more humanely than their French counterparts, with torture applied only after direct papal insistence in 1310. In Aragon, the Templars received advance warning of arrest orders and retreated to their fortified castles. King James II was forced to conduct military sieges against Templar strongholds like Miravet, which held out for nearly a year. When finally captured, Aragonese Templars were generally tried by local church councils that found insufficient evidence for most accusations. Similarly, in Germany, many ecclesiastical courts declared the Templars innocent of the charges against them. These geographical disparities in legal outcomes provide crucial insight into the political nature of the persecution. In regions beyond Philip's direct influence, where torture was applied less extensively or not at all, confessions were rare and acquittals more common. This pattern strongly suggests that the sensational admissions of French Templars reflected the methods used to extract them rather than actual organizational practices. Meanwhile, in France, Philip's officials continued gathering evidence and confessions. Guillaume de Nogaret employed the full range of interrogation techniques developed during earlier heresy investigations. These included sleep deprivation, starvation, and various torture devices designed to inflict maximum pain without immediately killing the victim. Records indicate that 36 Templars died during these initial interrogations, while many others suffered permanent injuries. Jacques de Molay's personal journey during this period reveals the psychological devastation wrought by medieval interrogation methods. Initially defiant, the Grand Master eventually confessed on October 24, 1307, admitting to denying Christ and spitting on the cross during reception ceremonies. This confession, from the highest authority in the order, proved devastating to Templar defense efforts. However, context matters. De Molay had endured torture, including having his feet held to fire until the flesh burned from the bones. A crucial moment of resistance came in December 1307, when de Molay was brought before cardinals at Chinon. Here, away from Philip's direct supervision, he retracted his confession, claiming he had admitted falsehoods only under torture. However, when threatened with renewed interrogation by royal officials, his courage failed again. This pattern of confession, retraction, and renewed confession under threat typified the experience of many Templar leaders, illustrating the psychological warfare aspects of medieval judicial procedures. By early 1308, Pope Clement made another attempt to assert control over the process. He suspended the authority of French inquisitors and dispatched cardinals to interview prominent Templars personally. This papal commission offered slightly more procedural fairness than royal interrogators, though the damage to most prisoners had already been done. Clement's actions represented less a defense of the Templars than an effort to maintain papal jurisdiction over a religious order directly subject to the Holy See. Philip responded with a bold political maneuver. In May 1300, he convened an Estates General at Tours, where representatives from the three estates, clergy, nobility, and commons, unanimously supported his actions against the Templars. Armed with this demonstration of national consensus, Philip met personally with Clement at Poitiers, bringing public pressure to bear on the pontiff. After tense negotiations, they reached a compromise. Philip would return Templar prisoners to papal custody, while Clement would allow French bishops and inquisitors to conduct the trials. From 1309 to 1311, a papal commission in Paris invited Templars to testify in defense of their order. Initially, hundreds volunteered, suggesting many knights still believed they could clear their name through legitimate proceedings. However, when these defenders learned that recanting confessions would mean being declared relapsed heretics and burned at the stake, most withdrew. Only a handful of knights, led by Pierre de Boulogne, a priest and Templar procurator, maintained a formal defense. Their efforts were systematically undermined. De Boulogne mysteriously disappeared from custody after presenting a particularly effective defense. Other defenders were threatened with execution. When 54 Templars persisted in proclaiming the order's innocence, Philip took dramatic action. On May 12, 1310, these 54 defenders were declared relapsed heretics by the Archbishop of Sens, Philip's cousin, and burned at the stake in a field outside Paris. This brutal demonstration effectively silenced further defense efforts. The Council of Vienne, convened in October 1311, represented the final ecclesiastical judgment on the Templar order. Pope Clement had assembled over 300 bishops, abbots, and theologians to consider the evidence. Contemporary accounts suggest most council participants remained unconvinced of the order's collective guilt. When Clement polled the prelates regarding abolition of the order, the majority favored continuing investigations or allowing the Templars to present a formal defense. Yet again, Philip applied political pressure. In February 1312, he arrived at Vienne with a substantial military force, demonstrating his willingness to use physical intimidation to achieve his objectives. Faced with this threat and lacking the personal courage to defy the French king, Clement issued the bull Vox in Excelso on March 22, 1312. This document dissolved the Templar order by papal decree, while carefully avoiding a definitive judgment on their guilt or innocence. The bull's language reveals Clement's equivocation. Though we cannot pronounce sentence according to the Inquisition and processes carried out with apostolic authority, by definitive sentence, we abolish the order of the temple and its constitution with the approval of the Sacred Council, perpetually prohibiting that anyone enter it in the future. In essence, the Pope suppressed the Templars not because they were proven guilty, but because their reputation had been too severely damaged to continue functioning effectively. 2 additional papal bulls followed. Ad Providem, issued on May 2nd, 1312, transferred Templar properties to the Knights Hospitaller. However, the practical implementation of this directive varied by region. In France, Philip extracted enormous administrative fees before releasing any assets, effectively securing much of the wealth he had sought from the beginning. Considerantis Dudum, issued on May 6th, established procedures for dealing with individual Templars according to their circumstances. Most rank-and-file members who had confessed and sought reconciliation were assigned penances and absorbed into other religious orders. Those who maintained the order's innocence faced potential execution as heretics. Senior officials, including Jacques de Molay and Geoffrey de Charny, preceptor of Normandy, remained in royal custody, awaiting final disposition of their cases. These high-ranking leaders had confessed under torture, retracted their confessions, then confessed again under threat of execution, creating legal ambiguity about their status. The final dramatic scene unfolded on March 18th, 1314. A platform had been erected outside Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, where cardinals would publicly announce sentences for the remaining Templar leaders. De Molay and de Charny were expected to repeat their confessions and receive life imprisonment. Instead, to the astonishment of the assembled crowd, both men proclaimed the order's innocence and retracted all previous confessions, declaring they had lied only under torture and threat of death. This unexpected defiance threw the proceedings into chaos. The cardinals, lacking authority to issue new sentences, remanded the prisoners for further deliberation. But Philip, upon hearing of the retractions, bypassed ecclesiastical authority entirely. That same evening, he ordered both men executed immediately. They were taken to the Ile de Javiot, a small island in the Seine, where they were burned at the stake with exceptional cruelty. The flames kept deliberately low to prolong their suffering. Contemporary accounts describe de Molay's remarkable composure during his execution. He reportedly requested that his hands be left unbound so he could pray, and asked to be positioned facing Notre Dame Cathedral. As the flames rose around him, tradition holds that he proclaimed the innocence of the order and issued his famous curse, summoning both Pope Clement and King Philip to meet him before God's judgment throne within the year. When both men indeed died within months, Clement in April and Philip in November 1314, it seemed to many observers that divine justice had affirmed the Templar cause. With these executions, the physical suppression of the Knights Templar was complete. An organization that had defended Christendom for nearly 2 centuries, pioneered international banking practices, and built an impressive network of castles, churches, and estates across multiple continents, had been destroyed in less than 7 years. The shocking speed of their fall and the dramatic circumstances surrounding their suppression ensured that the Templars would be remembered not just as historical figures, but as symbols of betrayal, mystery, and martyrdom in the Western imagination. The story of the Knights Templar represents one of history's most compelling narratives of rise and fall. From humble beginnings with 9 knights pledged to protect pilgrims, they ascended to unprecedented heights of power, only to collapse dramatically amid accusations of heresy and betrayal. Now, with the passage of 7 centuries, we can better understand the complex legacy they left behind. and why their story continues to captivate our imagination. The historical significance of the Templars extends far beyond their military contributions to the Crusades. They established innovative financial systems that prefigured modern banking practices. Their international network of preceptories created a sophisticated infrastructure spanning multiple continents. Their architectural knowledge produced castles incorporating advanced defensive features that influenced military construction for centuries. Perhaps most importantly, they represented an early experiment in creating a transnational organization that transcended traditional feudal boundaries. Yet for all their documented achievements, the Templars' enduring appeal lies partly in the mysteries surrounding their suppression. The contradictory evidence, lost records, and politically motivated proceedings create historical ambiguities that have never been fully resolved. Were they guilty of the heresies attributed to them? Did some Templars escape with hidden knowledge or treasure? Did their organizational structure continue underground after official dissolution? These questions have inspired speculation from the 14th century to the present day. Modern scholarship increasingly views the Templar suppression as primarily a political and economic event rather than a religious one. The charges against the order appear suspiciously tailored to justify their destruction while maximizing public outrage. King Philip IV's chronic financial problems and previous attacks on other wealthy groups, including Jews and Italian bankers, establish a pattern that contextualizes his actions against the Templars. Pope Clement V's compromised position as a French pontiff, based in Avignon, limited his ability to protect an order theoretically answerable only to papal authority. Archaeological evidence offers some counterbalance to the textual record dominated by the Templars' accusers. Excavations at Templar sites throughout Europe have revealed no artifacts supporting allegations of idol worship or heretical practices. Instead, they consistently show conventional Christian religious items and architectural elements typical of other monastic establishments. The material culture aligns with the Templars' public identity as devout Christian warriors, rather than with the secret heretics portrayed in confessions extracted under torture. Financial records similarly contradict narratives of Templar corruption. Account books demonstrate sophisticated but transparent management of resources entrusted to their care. Templar banking practices included detailed documentation of transactions, regular audits, and strict procedures for transferring funds. These records reflect an organization committed to institutional accountability rather than one exploiting its position for illicit gain. The contrast between this documented financial integrity and the moral depravity alleged during their trials highlights the dubious nature of the charges. Regional variations in trial outcomes provide compelling evidence for the political rather than ecclesiastical nature of the persecution. In areas beyond Philip IV's direct influence, proceedings against Templars were generally conducted with greater procedural fairness and resulted in more acquittals. The Templars were largely exonerated in England, Portugal, Germany, and much of Italy. Only in France, where royal officials directly supervised interrogations and made extensive use of torture, did confessions follow the narrative established by the king's prosecutors. The specific accusations against the Templars reveal much about medieval fears and prejudices rather than actual Templar practices. Charges combining religious transgression with sexual deviance exploited common anxieties about spiritual corruption, manifesting in physical immorality. Allegations of Islamic influence played on Crusade era concerns about cultural contamination from extended contact with Muslim societies. The portrayal of a secret initiation involving denial of Christ mirrored similar charges, leveraged against other persecuted groups, suggesting a formulaic template rather than specific evidence. Psychological analysis of confessions obtained under torture demonstrates consistent patterns that undermine their reliability. Initial denials typically gave way to admission after suffering reached unbearable levels. Confessions often incorporated details suggested by interrogators rather than spontaneously offered information. When torture ceased, many Templars retracted their statements, only to reconfirm them when threatened with renewed pain. These patterns match modern understanding of torture's effects, producing compliance rather than truth. The legal proceedings against the Templars established dangerous precedents that would influence European jurisprudence for centuries. By blending accusations of heresy with implications of treason against the state, Philip's lawyers developed a framework for treating religious nonconformity as a political crime. This conceptual merger would later facilitate the prosecution of various minority groups and political opponents under the guise of protecting spiritual and national integrity. The Templar trials thus represent a significant step in the evolution of state power over religious expression. Historical perspective allows us to recognize the Templars' suppression as part of broader trends in late medieval European society. The early 14th century witnessed increasing centralization of monarchical authority, declining papal independence, and the emergence of national identities that would eventually supplant feudal structures. The Templars, with their international organization, special privileges, and direct papal allegiance, represented an increasingly anachronistic model in this changing landscape. Their destruction signaled a shift toward the state-dominated religious paradigms that would characterize later European history. The aftermath of the Templar suppression produced unexpected consequences for various parties involved. Pope Clement V's capitulation damaged papal prestige and deepened questions about the independence of church authority. King Philip IV gained immediate financial relief, but died just a year after the final Templar executions, his male line extinguished within 14 years, giving rise to popular beliefs about de Molay's curse. The Hospitallers, who officially received most Templar properties, found themselves paying such enormous administrative fees to various monarchs that they gained little practical benefit from the transfer. For ordinary Templars who survived the initial persecutions, fates varied considerably. Most who confessed received absolution and pensions, often joining other religious orders. Some evidence suggests groups of former Templars continued associating informally despite official dissolution. In Portugal, the order was essentially renamed as the Order of Christ and continued functioning much as before. In Scotland, beyond effective papal jurisdiction, legends persistently claim that Templar refugees found sanctuary, potentially influencing later Scottish cultural and religious developments. The physical legacy of the Templars remains visible across Europe and the Mediterranean. Circular churches modeled on Jerusalem's Church of the Holy Sepulchre still stand in London, Paris, and throughout the continent. Massive castle complexes like Chateau Pèlerin demonstrate their architectural innovations. The Paris Temple, though demolished during the French Revolution, gave its name to an entire district of the city. Financial districts in London still reference Templar origins. These tangible remnants continually remind us of the order's historical reality beyond mythology. Intellectual and cultural aftershocks from the Templar suppression reverberated through European society for generations. The spectacle of an entire religious order destroyed through questionable legal procedures undermined public confidence in institutional justice. Literature of the period increasingly reflected themes of betrayal and institutional corruption. The concept of secret societies operating beyond official authority gained psychological potency through the Templar example. These cultural effects would resurface repeatedly in European intellectual history. The Templar myth began evolving almost immediately after their suppression. As early as the 1320s, stories circulated about hidden Templar treasures and secret survivors, maintaining the order's traditions. By the 17th century, these narratives had expanded to include esoteric knowledge, supposedly preserved by Templar descendants. The 18th century witnessed explicit attempts to claim Templar heritage by Masonic organizations, particularly through the creation of Templar-themed higher degrees. Each generation has reconstructed the Templars according to its own preoccupations and needs. Modern popular culture continues this process of mythologization through films, novels, games, and television series that portray the Templars variously as guardians of the Holy Grail, keepers of ancient wisdom, protectors of divine bloodlines, or members of elaborate conspiracies. While historically inaccurate, these narratives speak to the Templars' enduring symbolic power. They function as perfect historical vessels for exploring themes of hidden knowledge, institutional betrayal, and spiritual quests that resonate across centuries. Scholarly understanding of the Templars has evolved significantly in recent decades. Archaeological excavations at Templar sites have provided new material evidence about daily life and organizational practices. Previously untranslated Arabic and Hebrew sources have offered alternative perspectives on Templar activities in the Holy Land. Comparative analysis of trial records across different regions has clarified the political dimensions of their suppression. These advances have produced a more nuanced picture that balances documented history with understanding of myth-making processes. Financial historians have particularly reassessed the Templars' economic innovations. Their development of letters of credit for pilgrims represented an early solution to the challenges of transferring value across long distances without physically moving precious metals. Their standardized accounting practices created organizational consistency across geographically dispersed preceptories. Their role as neutral financial intermediaries between Christian and Muslim territories facilitated trade despite religious conflicts. These contributions represent genuine innovations in economic history. Military historians similarly acknowledge Templar contributions to medieval warfare beyond popular stereotypes of charging knights. They developed sophisticated systems for garrison rotation, supply logistics, and fortress maintenance that sustained Christian territories in hostile environments for decades. Their integration of local knowledge and Eastern military techniques demonstrated pragmatic adaptation rather than rigid ideological approaches. Their defensive architecture incorporated multiple redundant systems that balanced the need for maximum security with practical operational requirements. Religious scholars have reassessed Templar spirituality within the context of medieval devotional practices. Their rule established a disciplined daily cycle of prayer integrated with military duties. Their churches featured distinctive circular designs emphasizing Jerusalem connections. Their dedication to martyrdom reflected theological currents that valued physical sacrifice as spiritual testament. These elements suggest a coherent religious identity rather than the corrupt spirituality portrayed by their accusers. Perhaps the most valuable historical lesson from the Templar tragedy concerns the dangers of allowing political expediency to override judicial integrity. The proceedings against them demonstrated how torture produces unreliable evidence, how legal frameworks can be manipulated to target vulnerable groups, and how propaganda can shape public opinion against designated enemies. These patterns have recurred throughout human history, making the Templar case an important reference point for understanding institutional abuses of power. For those seeking to separate history from legend, the Templar story offers important methodological insights. It demonstrates the necessity of evaluating source reliability based on the circumstances of document creation. It highlights the importance of cross-referencing information across multiple independent sources. It shows how archaeological evidence can confirm or contradict textual claims. Perhaps most importantly, It illustrates how historical narratives evolve to serve the needs and interests of succeeding generations. The ultimate historical significance of the Templars lies in their embodiment of medieval society's complex interactions between spiritual ideals and worldly power. They began with a purely religious mission to protect pilgrims, yet evolved into sophisticated financial administrators. They took vows of personal poverty while managing vast organizational wealth. They answered directly to the Pope, yet served secular monarchs on battlefields and in treasuries. These contradictions reflect the intricate relationship between church and state that defined medieval European civilization. As we conclude our exploration of the Knights Templar, we're left with a richer understanding of both their documented history and their legendary afterlife. Their rise represented the height of crusading idealism, the concept that warrior monks could combine spiritual devotion with military prowess in service of Christendom. Their fall demonstrated the harsh realities of power politics, trumping religious ideals. Between these historical bookends, their actual achievements and innovations left genuine marks on Western civilization that deserve recognition beyond mythology. What do you think about the Knights Templar? Were they innocent victims of royal greed, or was there truth to some of the allegations against them? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into medieval history, you might want to check out our video on the mysterious disappearance of the Cathars, another religious group whose dramatic suppression continues to inspire conspiracy theories today. Don't forget to subscribe to Insomnia History for more journeys through the shadowy corners of the past. Until next time, remember that history's greatest mysteries often hide in plain sight.